there were two little boys, 8 and 10, playing with some white little girls and boys out in the meadow, and a kissing game ensued. Well, the kids didn't think anything about it. One of the little white girls went home and told her mama, "Mama, I was playing with Hanover today and I kissed him." Well, her white mother got all excited, started scrubbing her mouth with soap and water, and when the father came in, she told the father about it. And the father got upset, and he got his shotgun, and he got with some of his neighbors, and they were going to go and find the boys. He was planning to kill them. I don't know how the sheriff got involved in it, but the sheriff, the chief of police, went and arrested those two little boys, took them to court. The judge said he had a separate trial for the white family, brought them in so they didn't have to face the black ones. Had a trial for those boys and sentenced them to indeterminate sentences. They were going to have to go to a juvenile home until they were 21 years old for kissing the little white girl while they were playing. Meanwhile, while they were in jail, happened to be around Halloween, and the police thought it would be funny to put on Klan robes and scare them. And they did that. They had them in the basement of the jail. Those boys had not seen their mothers since they had been arrested. They were there and did not see their parents until the so-called trial. Well, Robert heard about it, and we started a defense committee for the boys, and Robert was very excellent at getting word out. He wrote up some news releases, and we had a crusade at that time, and we sent out news releases, and we were able to get people all over the country concerned about it, and one Dutch paper ran an editorial saying, and with a picture saying that these little boys were jailed for a kiss. There was a young white reporter who came to our town, and she wanted to do the story, and so Rob and she took her to the place where the boys were held, and they slipped in a camera and took pictures of the little boys. Well, we were able finally to get those little boys released after lots and lots and lots of pressure, because when they, their picture appeared on the front page of this Dutch paper, there was a big outcry. And the United States then put pressure on North Carolina, and North Carolina put pressure on our county. But they accused Robert of being a communist, of course, because only communists, you know, would come forth, not good Southern people, to intervene in a case like that. If you get a chance to read Negroes With Guns, there is an account of that story there, and also in Radio Free Dixie.
I'd like to just make a comment about the book Negroes With Guns, because I saw it when I first came out to the Bay Area in July of 1967 in Eldridge Cleaver's apartment. He had a whole case full of them, and he was handing them out. And anybody that came into the Black Panther Party had to get a copy of Negroes With Guns. They had to read it. We had to discuss it. And this notion of self-defense that was in the book was very effective, because Robert Williams, for those of you who haven't read it, Robert Williams pointed out that if there's violent Klansmen who believe fervently in white supremacy, they will come to take your life. But if you're armed, they have to make a calculation. Are they willing to risk their superior life to take your inferior life? So there was an important role to be armed that, in Robert Williams' discussion, reduced the level of violence. And so in the community that I was accustomed to being in the South, all the black people had guns. I mean, it was just not even discussed. You had guns. There'd be a call. It would go out. If, in fact, they heard the Klan was going to ride, everybody would be prepared. And then there was no discussion. There was no parades. In fact, I thought it was odd when I came to Oakland. I said, you know, people would walk around with guns and displaying them and parading around. It just seemed kind of, well, you wouldn't do it in Alabama, but everybody had the guns. But as far as the concept, in '67, there were huge rebellions. In this country, they tried to call them riots. There was uprisings in Detroit in which the U.S. Army in tanks were shooting, you know, house-to-house sniper fighting in Detroit. There was riots and uprisings and rebellions in Newark that thousands of people were arrested and millions of dollars of property damage. And so we thought, the revolutionaries, the Black Power revolutionaries, we thought this was the beginning. You know, this was like insurrection, and it was going to move from insurrection to revolution. And our concept of self-defense was not merely, we will have weapons so when the terrorists or the police come, we'll be defended. That was definitely a core. But also, the notion of violence that was so pervasive. The black community was subjected to the violence of horrible education, the violence of bad housing, the violence of insults, the violence of the inability to get jobs that are sufficient for your livelihood, being subjected to trials by juries that were against you from the get-go, being sent to prison, not having a fair trial, being sent into the military to fight against people who, on the other side of the world, had done nothing to us. And so these were, in the Black Panther Party, considered forms of violence against which we had to defend ourselves. So this notion of self-defense was broader than weapons, but it did not at all exclude weapons, and that was fundamental. The notion that people had to accept the responsibility of standing up for themselves.
In Monroe, North Carolina, we knew that the power structure in the local town was against us. But we didn't know when we started fighting that the FBI was supporting the power structure, that the federal government was supporting the power structure. We were asking for simple things we thought were simple things, just the right to have a job in a plant that was being supported by tax dollars and government contracts. But they wouldn't give us that, and Robert was one trying to go through channels, asking the federal government to come in and intervene. Look what these people are doing to us. You know, they were oppressing us terribly. But at the same time, not unlike what was happening with them, when the Klan would come out, people would be afraid. That had been our history. The people would go in the houses and close the door and pull down the blinds. They had the guns in there, but they still would be afraid of the Klan. Well, Robert said we should not be afraid of the Klan, because if they're going to invade our communities, we should protect ourselves. Well, he was very much one for obeying the law, and the law said you could carry a gun as long as it wasn't concealed. So he walked around with the Luger on one side, and when we drove our cars around, even during our civil rights movement, we had a gun on the seat of the car. So they were legal. He was trying to stay within the legalities of what the law said, but see, what he knew but did not accept is that the law wasn't meant for us, but he was going to make it be for us. And he said if he would rather die just 5 minutes standing up like a man than crawling at the feet of his oppressors. Fortunately, he never had to kill anybody. I witnessed 3 attempts on his life while the authorities stood there and watched and pretended that they just didn't see. On one occasion, he asked the chief of police, "Did you see that? Do you hear those shots?" We were picketing at a swimming pool, and people were shooting at our demonstrators. And the police chief said, "No, I didn't hear anything, Robert." He said, "Well, I'm glad to know you're hard of hearing, because when we start shooting, you won't hear that either."